I'm ready. You ready?
Yes.
Well, if you were going to do the whole apple dumpling gang, it should have been, well, I'm ready. You ready? I said I was ready. So.
Oh, wow, that's been a while.
Yes. Hey, we're the old guys, right?
That's true.
We're the Statler and Waldorf of Dragon Magazine here. And now we have to take a moment and explain to everyone under 35 who Statler and Waldorf
Yeah, I
were.
was about to say, I had to explain it to my son when we were watching the Muppet movie the first time.
Yeah. All right. So, Dragon 154. We are not so old this time. The Dragon Magazine logo now has the word magazine on there and the bar underneath. They've started doing candy stripes in the upper corner on every one of the issues. The price has only gone up to $3.50. It's only gone up 50 cents from several years before, so that's not too bad. But this is during those 3 or 4 or 5 years there where Dragon was insistent on having dragons on the cover in more than just the name. So that wasn't too bad. You take a guess as to when we are here?
Good Lord. Given everything, doing a little math in my head, dividing by 12. 92?
You were already in the workforce when this one hit, so this is actually February of 1990.
You bite your tongue. I was a PhD candidate. Actually, no, I was on my way. I was in divinity school.
Okay.
I was in divinity school learning stuff out in New York.
How'd that work out?
I'm not currently a man of the cloth, so I think that should be reasonably indicative.
Remember when you could play Sniper multiplayer on CompuServe?
Had a delightful conversation with some friends of mine on another podcast about Genie. And
we talked about Genie on this show also before.
Yeah, and and first, Sniper's a great game, but this was multiplayer computer gaming at its very, very finest in 1992.
1990.
Oh, 90, sorry, I was
1990.
thinking 92. In 1990, here it was. So what was my mainline PC? Yes, it was my Amiga.
Yeah.
I would have been on my Amiga by then, 2000.
So what TSR had done when TSR had bought out SPI, they now had the IP rights to all of SPI's tabletop games, and Sniper was that seminal man-to-man World War II combat game that was almost a role-playing game, but not quite, because there were rules that you could graft onto the basic. I mean, you could just throw out the tabletop game with a squad on each side and chase each other around and blow each other up, but there were rules that you could use for experience and progression of your dudes. And so you could keep the same guys around through a couple of campaigns, at which point you're playing a role-playing game. But once TSR had that IP, they could then use Sniper to do whatever they wanted. And look, before my son was ever down in the basement spending 10 hours a day playing Destiny online with a bunch of his friends, you could do this on CompuServe long ago.
Yes.
So, yeah, I was going to say, I wonder how many of our listeners were even born when this was out, but I think we've only got 2, and they probably both were. So
Right,
yeah. And then the Crystal Power Pendant ad.
Oh, dear God.
Well, so this is notable in that what is on our first inside page, it is not an ICE ad.
Right.
So it's also not Liv Tyler, because Liv Tyler was like 3 years old when this was being shot, but it does sort of evoke Liv Tyler and some of the Lord of the Rings ads that you see floating around out there.
But it was if you want to go into it, if briefly, it's the Franklin Mint.
Yes.
Which, if you're of a generation, they did all these notionally high-end tchotchkes. The greatest ones being they did do a line of toy soldiers, particularly toy soldier chess sets that you could buy via the mail, one piece at a time. But the thing that's great, look at the cost of this piece of glass.
5 equal monthly installments of $39 each.
$200 for those incapable of math.
Well, it says set with a full cut diamond.
Sure it is. So great.
Well, but what I think it was is the full cut diamond is like the little bitty dot there in the middle.
Yep.
And then there's the piece of glass behind it.
And a piece of glass behind it.
Yep.
So great. All right.
And of course, we hit the Space Lords ad. And so, color figures. Color figures are always kind of cool here. I always wondered what it would be like to have a job as a professional figure painter. Because, you know, somebody had to take the time to do all of the figure painting for these ads, for the catalogs, for all the things that these guys put out. Who was it that was sort of forced to have to be a figure painter? I mean, that's the gig I want. No?
Oh, absolutely. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But you always figure, now I certainly never knew, but I always figured that those people were wildly underpaid.
Well, the thing is, they may have been like some dude from shipping and receiving that happened to be a talented figure painter, and so he'd do shipping and receiving 30 hours a week, spend 10 hours a week painting. Yeah, but still, it's better than spending 40 hours a week doing shipping and receiving.
Well, that's true.
All right, so here we are, February of 1990. James Ward is our publisher. Roger Moore is our editor. We have a separate fiction editor. We do have a UK correspondent in UK advertising. So, all right, go ahead and look up your February of 1990 stuff. While you do that, we'll let people look at our cover painting. Bob Eggleton is one of the 4 horsemen who traded his horse for a dragon. So this is Death Rides a Pale Dragon. All right. So
the question always becomes, what was the number 1 song in February 1990?
February of 1990. So this is, I'm on the glide path towards graduation of my senior year of high school at this point. So, despite being one of the 2 old guys on the podcast, I'm the young one of the 2 old guys on the podcast.
There you go.
So, I'll tell you what we couldn't avoid was, as we started to get closer to graduation, Wind Beneath My Wings was the one that got played non-stop for like 3 months. Every time there was some event honoring seniors, we got afflicted with, or we had Wind Beneath Our Wings inflicted on us. Wind Beneath My Wings inflicted on us. But I don't think that was on the charts in February of 1990. So, this might be REM.
It's a little early for the big break.
A little early in the year for REM. See, the problem is what I was listening to in February of 1990 was not stuff that was on the charts.
Well, and knowing your musical proclivities, I doubt you were listening to this song, although I'm sure you heard it because it was ubiquitous.
Something from Whitney Houston.
Negative. Paula Abdul, Opposites Attract.
Okay. I remember that song mainly from the video because of the really good animation they had with the animated cat dancing with her. So, you're right, not one of my favorite tunes. But yes, quite ubiquitous.
This, and for the best movie released, we just missed the dominant force in film that was Driving Miss Daisy.
Okay.
This was released January 28th, 1990. We're also a little too early for The Hunt for Red October, released March 4th, 1990.
All right.
So movie that was the best movie, or not the best, I should say, the biggest grossing movie released in February of 1990 was?
Rattle and Hum.
Oh, that actually is not the worst guess in the world. Steven Seagal, Hard to Kill.
Okay. I will say that I have still not seen that movie.
Really?
Really?
That is the only Steven Seagal movie I can recall seeing. And I believe I've seen it 3 times. For
What, did you
reasons
lose a
that I
bet?
sit here now escape me.
I was going to say, did you lose a bet? So, where was Rattle and Hum in all this? I'm just curious. So,
there was. I'm gonna have to find that. Keep going. I'm gonna find that.
All right. Well, while you look up Rattle and Hum, I honestly think I'm off by like 6 months on Rattle and Hum, but that was the only thing I could think of from 1990.
Oh my goodness, you missed it by a bit. 10 October 1988.
Yeah, so I was quite a ways off. So for the special attractions, we have the Art of Making War. So we're gonna talk some war and have some warrior kings and empire builders. Jim, for you, we have the making of a paladin.
Nice.
So we're gonna talk some paladins.
We should always be talking paladins.
And we're gonna talk a little heraldry, and so we're gonna talk an army campaign. So we're covering a little bit of military and the martial art, not martial arts. But we're going to talk a little bit about war in the large here in the fantasy world. And then our usual features with the Game Wizards and the role-playing reviews. There is some fiction from Dragonlance, from Margaret Weiss and Racy Hickman. Not sure if that's intentional, but we'll find out when we get there. The Role of Computers and Voyage of the Princess Ark column from our boy Bruce, our friend of Grog. There is a cartoon in Dragon Mirth that you will get quite the chuckle out of when we get there as well. The letters contest, the letters bit, on mudslinging. We have letters responding to letters.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing. While I was listening to you and poking around, I had an opportunity to go back and find the letter that this letter is mad about. And it is the first thing that dawned on me, and I forgot to check it as I was hoping to look at it. This letter, let me look this up very quickly. This letter is responding to a letter that originally appeared in the Dragon magazine in November of 1989.
So, I mean, that was like 4 months earlier.
Oh, I just want you to try to frame in your mind the idea that you could have a flame war that stretched over 4 months between iterations.
Yeah. Well, okay. All we have to do is say combat mission DRM and get out of the way, and we will have a flame war that can alternate iterations for as long as we choose.
Right, but you're not likely to have even that flame war, as vicious as it is. Can you imagine if every shot between the guys who love Battlefront and combat mission and those that are frustrated by its DRM and pricing policies had to come at 1 month, or even in this case, the math is hard, 4 month intervals?
Yeah. It would make my life as a forum moderator a whole lot easier.
You're taking a nap on a Tuesday afternoon, and you suddenly hear, ding! Yeah. Uh-oh. He's replied to that post from 2 months ago.
All right.
As opposed to people nearly simultaneously typing.
Yeah. All right. So, some sage advice. Again, errata for nerds who can't figure it out themselves. Can a lightning bolt spell be cast vertically or at right angles to the caster, or must it be cast in line with the caster? A right angle is kind of in line with the caster, isn't it? When you're going out from a single point, that single point is in line with everything, isn't it?
I don't even know what... I understand vertically. Is he talking at the ground?
I don't know.
Because, quite honestly, to take in line with the caster and his target, I think that's specious. Because clearly, if you imagine a caster standing and extending his or her arm forward to cast the spell, that arm is perpendicular to the run of his or her body.
Well, but I think you could point your arm into the sky. I think you could point your arm sideways. I think the must be cast in line with the caster is like you can't shoot it around a corner. So I could get that. So, you know.
Oh, I see. Okay, follow. So I don't know what right angle means, and I don't know why that contradicts, or must it be in line with the caster? To me, those things aren't contradictory.
Yeah. I think that's just somebody that was getting into an argument around the ping pong table in the basement and decided to write a letter. The surprising thing is that they answered it.
No. I want to know. I'm going to demand a ruling, Mr. Williams, Mr. Skip Williams.
Yeah.
Take a look at the top question at the right. Is that true?
Can a creature's throat or mouth be sealed with a hold, portal, or wizard lock?
No. It can only be used on wood, metal, or stone. Is that true?
I don't know, but
I remember no such ruling.
Well, so here are a couple of questions then. Can I use it on someone with braces?
Right.
Can I use it on George Washington?
Yes, definitely. Wooden teeth.
I'm assuming I could use it on a golem.
Right.
So
I think that is I think that the player who suggested this is extremely creative, and I would absolutely allow it, permitting a saving throw.
Yeah.
I'm looking that up after this show is over.
Don't lie, you're looking it up during the show.
That's okay, fine.
We know better. So, can a spellcaster still cast spells if he is polymorphed or reincarnated? Yes, probably.
That's great.
Well, the polymorph self, I mean, that's a legit issue. Like, if you polymorph yourself into a gelatinous cube, it's a little tough to, like, you know, do the wiggle your fingers and speak the words and all. You know, but the depending on what you're polymorphed into. Now, as far as like being reincarnated, I don't know why not. If you're reincarnated, you're bringing the same person back to life. What the hell? Why wouldn't you? Right? That's just a DM being a dick.
We're given to that.
All right. This one is kind of entertaining. A brief glimpse at this. Oh, how the world turns. A few weeks ago, Zeb Cook wandered into my office and told me the Berlin Wall was coming down. I had been to both East and West Berlin in '79 while I was in the Army. I was staggered by the news. The world was miraculously made a better and brighter place, or so I certainly hope. Shortly after that, I had a slightly twisted thought. This was probably bad news for all the post-Holocaust Nukes and Mutants RPGs on the market. Ha, 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 ha.
Well, that's, you know, there's a thing there. Okay, so Hold Portal, which made Gizmodo's list of the 20 most worthless spells in D&D.
So now we're going to have to go back up a couple pages.
I'm just going to say, Hold Portal does indeed, and their objection to it is actually well taken. A spell that holds a door, gate, or window made of wood, metal, or stone, there it is, shut as if it were locked. You know what also does that? A lock. And unlike Hold Portal, a lock can actually hold your portal for more than a minute per level of the spell's caster.
Yes.
So that's all right.
That presumes you're hauling a lock around when you're busy trying to, like, escape down a narrow alley. And,
just for the record, you, of all people, are too familiar with the ways of role-playing to think for a moment that we don't want to... We all have a bag of freaking holding with, you know, our 10 iron spikes, our flasks filled with burning oil,
our 10-foot poles,
etc. Yeah, so we'll not go there. But no, I mean, this is amazing. I mean, history is a funny thing, and there was such incredible optimism. I have in my office a chunk of the Berlin Wall cut from it by my high school German teacher, who went there to chip it down, and that's crazy.
My parents have
a little sad.
My parents have a chunk of it at the house, and I will say that I was actually, when it was coming down, I was in Louisiana because my grandmother's birthday is in October, and so, you know, that was the first inklings on the news of the wall starting to come down and everything, and I called my dad from Louisiana from his parents' place. My mom, my brother, and I had gone down there for my grandmother's birthday. Dad stayed home because he had some work stuff. And I called him and I said, overnight my passport to me. I'm going to Germany. And my dad's like, what the hell? And I said, I know you've got the money in the bank to buy a plane ticket to Berlin. I need my passport. I'm already packed, right? I mean, I'm traveling, so I've already got my luggage. I'm going to Berlin. Like, the wall is only coming down once. And my dad's like, what are you going to do in Berlin? Dad, we know like 24 people that live in Berlin. My dad had spent a bunch of time in the arms control business, and the U.S. military liaison mission in Potsdam, of the 12 dudes stationed there at the time, I think 10 of them were former classmates of my dad. I knew these folks. I grew up with the kids. It's not like I didn't have anywhere to stay. It's not like I needed help getting from the airport to the train station to somebody's house. I speak fluent German. And so, like, Dad, send the damn passport. The Berlin Wall's only coming down one time. I would like to be there for it. He wouldn't do it. I'm still irked about it to this day. But we're coming up on 30 years, and I'm still irked about it. But I do love this little bit, and that does take some of the thrill out of playing World War III games. Last time I checked, Under an Iron Sky sold out in like an hour and a half.
Well, but that unfortunately is when something seems implausible, we're not likely to play it. There's now almost a warm nostalgia for that. It is interesting to me though, and we obviously know the folks with that are involved with the various lock and load titles that cover the Cold War gone hot.
Yeah,
and their persistent interest is very much part of gaming. It's a remarkable thing how much it continues to interest, and you're absolutely right that very recent one sold out in a minute and a half.
Yeah, I'm going to throw down a bit of a gauntlet here though, and I'm probably going to piss some people off with this, but I'm going to do it anyway, because this is a massive pet peeve of mine, and that is we run into a bunch of people that see these Cold War gone hot in the mid '80s war games, and they go, oh, that's modern stuff. We can use that to, explore what's happening today. No, we can't. Time out, stop, let's back up. Just because there's an M1 tank on a counter in a game from '85, and we still have M1 tanks in the inventory today, does not mean we're fighting the same war. Right? From today back to 1985 is how many years? Almost, right. It's 36, 38. What are we at? So 85 to 2015 is 30 years, so we're at 33 years. From 85, let's back up 33 years, and where were we? So, you're going to tell me that we haven't advanced significantly at all from 85 to now. When you back up from 85, you're back to the Korean War. From the Korean War to 85, we changed quite a bit, and you're going to tell me warfare hasn't evolved at all in the next 33 years. The training organization, the doctrine, the other gizmos that don't always show up in a really cool icon on the counter all matter. Electronic warfare has changed hugely. The recon tools that we have available to us have changed hugely. Soviet organization has changed hugely, and I use Soviets and Russians interchangeably, and my dad gets mad when I do it, but I'm like, really? Really? Come on. Aside from the flag, what's actually changed? They've got a little less real estate. But anybody that wants to dust off an 85 era Cold War's gone hot game. And look, I love those games. I grew up on the Modern Battle Squads, on Assault, on the SPI 5th Corps series. Those were my games. That's what I loved growing up because in large part I'm living it. I was in Germany from 83 to 88. That's what I lived. And so that was a really big deal. Those were the games that I grew up on. Those are not the equivalents of modern games today. And just a cursory look at something like one of the Putin's War series from, isn't it Ty Bomba that's been designing those?
Correct.
Yeah. Correct. So any one of Ty's Putin War series bounced up against any of the lock and load, nation, the World at War series, they're completely different games for completely different eras for a reason. And it frustrates me to no end when people lose sight of that. World War III didn't happen in 85, but we shouldn't use 1985 era games or games portraying 1985 to try and play out a possible shooting war today. So, all right, off my soapbox. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
The Angry Mothers from Heck, and what do we do about them?
Useless article.
Well,
this is stupid. I mean, this one bugged me. I was reading it a little bit in advance. I mean, did you experience this?
No. But I'll tell you why. One of the reasons I didn't, and I actually use this to deflect multiple folks that sort of argued with me with the whole "there's devils in them there games" arguments. Like, yeah, and your job is to kill them. What's the problem?
But that's not even what this is.
No, that's not what this is.
No, they're talking about, mom's not going to like the pictures, or that game is violent. I think this is a weird. This is a straw man.
Yeah.
This is an absolute straw man.
Well, and not only that, but we saw in one of our other video episodes, Michael Stackpole actually did a better job of making this argument. So, there's, when we had essentially the same argument with Stackpole in another one of the issues we've done. Look, it was a bit of a space filler.
Well, and I understand they're trying to share a little look behind the scenes as to how they approached solving this problem. I find this patently insincere. I don't think they did these things to prevent angry moms, because their drawings aren't less lurid, less suggestive. We're going to see drawings as we go through the rest of that suggest exactly the opposite. They weren't aware of, this strikes me as a lot of self-serving nonsense.
Well,
perhaps. I don't know why I'm so angry about this particular thing. Probably because it seems to me to be virtue signaling on this topic, and I find that tedious.
Yeah. Well, the other bit about that is, yes, they did tone down some of the artwork, and there's other places where they didn't tone it down at all. But we still don't have anything like the recalled artwork from the Palace of the Silver Princess.
Right.
Not until we get, 25 years later to the Book of Vile Darkness. So, all right, we're still in our forum letters. We're going to skip that. Here we go. The Art of Making War with a Tim Truman illustration.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Tim Truman's the guy that did a whole lot of comic book art too, didn't he?
He sure did.
And so he was the man responsible for Turok, if I recall.
That I don't know for sure, but okay.
I'm pretty sure he's the guy that was responsible for Turok, which was a pretty nifty comic book, and also much later became a popular first-person shooter video game.
Yes. So. Yeah, for the Nintendo 64, among many others.
Yeah. Warrior Kings and Empire Builders.
This is interesting for a number of reasons. Probably first and foremost is that it's written by a woman.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I like most about it is somebody actually cared about layout and design.
Oh, yes.
Like, we've got solid headings. We've got a nice piece of art. We've got some visual balance to it all. We don't have, garish, obnoxious boxes floating around in different places. But it's not too bad. But yeah, you are correct. It is written by a woman here.
And this is right at the cusp of the time that Dungeons and Dragons was going to start releasing for what became for the second edition their series of historical supplements, their historical source books, like A Mighty Fortress is my favorite. But
Charlemagne's Paladins, I figured, would have been one of your favorites.
That's also true. I love that book. But it is interesting that they're trying basically, and there's nothing really much here to cover because you're reviewing history at that point. But it's a series of small pieces about what is the nature of warfare. The business about Charlemagne and Julius Caesar is all stuff that most of the folks following the GrogHeads are probably going to know. But what's interesting, what I found particularly interesting about it is how it tries to get at the concept of what it was to be a commander at this time.
Yep.
Limited mobility, limited technology, limited communication capabilities, and how this was, they were always on the go. They had this, constant, almost, this non-stop dynamic of how they ruled and trying to, and there's the header, keeping busy as we go down a little bit. So it's a neat little piece about, if you're going to be, even if you're just going to be a fictitious leader, a fantasy leader, if you're going to settle your campaign in any kind of medieval period, there's a unique set of dynamics that you have to acknowledge.
Yep.
And it's nice to see that. Or if you're doing something Roman or late Roman or something Bronze Age-ish, you should think about that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
One of the nice things is the artwork has clearly gone up to professional level, and this is no longer 5th grade pencil sketch, 5th grade binder sketches. So this is an important note. Wars rarely end.
I like that one.
Once you're at war, it's tough to stop. There's a reason it's called the 100 Years' War.
Right, and frankly, you only find out it's a 100 Years' War when you look at the telescope backwards.
Yes. At the time, it was just that damn war that won't end.
Right.
So.
Good piece. Thumbs up.
Wizardry. You've played Wizardry. Now here comes the Citadel Adventure of the Crystal Keep. You play this one?
No. Things like this were... Yeah, I'm looking down there. Yep, see, you can see at the bottom, Mac Plus or Atari ST. Now, there it was. It was available for the Amiga.
Soon available for IBM and Amiga. I had this one for the Mac. This was one that I could actually get for the Mac, so I got it. Okay, not a great game. Honestly, Wizardry was more fun.
Yeah, see, Wizardry fell between the two stools of my time with the Commodore 64, when it was an Apple exclusive, and then when it wandered over to the PC.
You were a Bard's Tale guy, weren't you?
Oh, yes.
So.
Oh, obsessively. Still know the name of the mad god.
All right, here you go. Making of a Paladin. Love the artwork over there. Nice, heroic. You don't even need to look it up. You know that's Jeff D. artwork. Right.
And a nice sword, a nice blended, non-historical fantasy sword stuck in a dragon's head.
Well, I mean, what historical sword would you expect to see stuck in a dragon's head?
Right. No, that's good. And they clearly set this one they set this one the same way.
Jeff D's artwork always looked like superhero movie posters. That was Jeff's thing, and it was always great artwork. There was always a lot of really cool, active, heroic poses in it, and it's like, so Michael Bay is a really annoying movie director because the guy hasn't figured out that half of the country gets motion sickness watching his movies, and the guy, I think, doesn't realize that they invented the Steadicam in '77. But in every single Michael Bay movie, there is that one moment that you can tell that they're planning to hit pause and take the picture, and that's like the movie poster shot. And so in Armageddon, it's when the oil drillers are walking out, walking through the hangar door with the smoke and everything behind them as they're walking in there. You can see these coming a mile away in Michael Bay movies. In The Rock, it was Nicolas Cage holding the flares up to signal the planes to not blow up Alcatraz. Jeff D. artwork always looked like it belonged in one of those paused screenshots from a Michael Bay movie. And that's the thing. Like, you don't even need, when you see this piece of artwork, you don't need to see that it's Jeff D. You can just tell. All right, let's dive in. Talk to me about Paladins, dude.
Well, it's a good piece. I mean, and look, I'm old school. I'm old. I don't believe women should be paladins. I don't believe that non-human races should be paladins. I know you've changed it, but this article is written very much from the place where I write from. He says in the second paragraph, first edition player's handbook, Unearthed Arcana, and second edition player's handbook. And then they go through, and the thing I like, the theme of it more than anything else, is they're not just fighters with powers.
Yep.
That
Yep.
they are servants of religions, whichever one you choose, although they are lawful good religions, and that they are the product of a lifetime of training and devotion, which explains all their strange rules about poverty and not being able to loot the same way, and the other abilities they have. I mean, it's for gosh sakes, it's why they get the ability to lay on hands and resurrect people.
Yep. So, here's a question for you.
Sure.
The Knights Templar, clerics or paladins?
As conceived, or as I mean, it depends who you believe.
Okay, as conceived, not as portrayed by Sam Neill in the Ivanhoe TV movie.
Nor as perceived by Philip the Fair after he did them a serious wrong.
Yeah, well, that would have been more appropriate if we were releasing this episode last week on Friday the 13th, but...
Yeah, yes, good point. almost certainly paladins.
Yeah. I think as conceived, you're probably right. But that begs the question that why... So, clerics obviously can be any religion, whereas the paladins are lawful good, but given the seemingly great historical overlap in, as we're looking for historical analogs going backwards through time, are paladins not simply just lawful good clerics who get to use edged weapons?
No, I think their fighting training is more significant.
Yeah. Because, I mean, there are some folks that think of clerics simply as the village priest. And there are other folks that think of clerics as the Knights Templar. And there's a case to be made for either one. And let's face it, first edition AD&D didn't really clear up a lot of those distinctions. But when you start looking for the historical parallels, a lot of the things that first edition AD&D talked about the clerics were supposed to be really were kind of what the paladins were. So.
Yep.
Yeah. Closest portrayal to a paladin in fantasy literature. Not counting, like, actual D&D licensed stuff. What do you think? I have one in mind. I'm curious if you're going to come up with the same one. But
gosh,
if you're looking at fantasy literature characters, the closest one that you can think of to...
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's not so much going to be true fantasy literature, because as I think I've discussed on this show, from my perspective, fantasy literature began and ended with Tolkien. and it is one of the many interesting pieces of the Tolkien literature that he doesn't have a paladin.
Yeah.
So for me, it's
I think there are no shortage of authors that actually write fantasy stuff that are going to argue with you that fantasy ended with Tolkien. So,
I mean, it's to me, it ultimately will always be Lancelot.
Yeah.
He is the classic paladin story.
But is that fantasy literature? Or is that historical literature?
Well, that's fantasy. That's the Lancelot we know is a fiction. So from dating from the 14th centuries.
I will say this: anybody that thinks that there's a paladin in Game of Thrones is on drugs. There's nobody in Game of Thrones that's good enough to be a paladin. And if you want to make the argument for Jon Snow, you're still wrong. It's okay.
No, that's goofy talk.
Yes. The one that I was thinking of, David Eddings' Belgariad series.
Oh, okay.
Mandarellin.
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm at least familiar. I can't say I know it.
Yeah. So there is a land, one of the lands in David Eddings' Belgariad series. There is a country that is sort of torn apart. There are there's sort of the wayward northerners that are roguish Robin Hood types, and the classic knights on horseback types from further south that speak in very stilted, formal thee and thou type of English, and so it's the both people together. They're horrendish people is the country, but there is Mandarellin is the knight that the party sort of picks up on their journeys, and he accompanies them through quite a bit. but he is very clearly a paladin in all that he does and sees and everything that he does throughout that series. So,
Cool.
Yeah, the I picked up the Eddings series in '84 when three of the first five books were already out from the Belgariad, and then picked up 4 and 5 as they were initially released. And then he had the sequel series, the Malorian series, after that. Now, Eddings also has two other companion series. They're completely different world, but it's two trilogies. The second one is a sequel to the first that take place in a totally different world. It's the Elenium, and I don't remember what the second one is called, the second trilogy. But they have orders of knights in those books that are very clearly intended to be paladins. But the Mandarellan predates them by a decade, and that's who I always think of when I start thinking of paladins in literature. So if you haven't read Eddings, go find it, go look it up. You can read them. Good books. All in the Family: Heraldry, Politics, and Feudalism in Fantasy Campaigns.
Yeah, and again, here's always the place where I'm just a little curious about it, because I absolutely love this story from the Knight's Tale that they quote here briefly, but it's always interesting because heraldry and politics and feudalism, they're all real things, and there are I actually have had a chance to meet one of the pursuivants at arms over the years, the guys that are actually charged with interpreting British heraldry. There are many other kinds of heraldry. Yeah. So I'm always curious to see how close they want to say, and if your point is, hey, borrow this, and now it's the Middle Ages except it has monsters, that's awesome, because quite frankly, that's what I prefer to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's very neat to see. I was going through here, and it was interesting, the idea that they were going to have heralds.
Yeah.
They were going to have heralds as a class or do a thing. They play a fascinating role in the history of the Middle Ages. I don't know how much fun they'd be in a role-playing sense. I don't know as I've ever thought of playing one.
Well, and I don't know that you would necessarily need to stat them out as a unique character class if they are simply NPCs that help populate the court. I think if you're trying to create some sort of character, PC-driven campaign around them in some sort of heraldic role, you could probably wing it by simply statting out your characters as fighters or rogues of some sort, and still get away with everything you need to without needing to custom class these guys. One of the things that I like is that they are describing what would be in a college of heraldry, and while it's not necessarily that this is a rigid, hard and fast, it must be this way sort of thing, it does give the DM enough that if the characters stumble across some coat of arms and they want to learn more about it as a clue in a larger mystery, that they have something. Okay, so now we're going to go to we're going to go look up the local heraldric college, and let's go see who we end up talking to in there. Well, you're not going to walk in and immediately go talking to the Kings of Arms, right? They're not going to talk to you. But, can you talk to one of those underlings? Sure. So.
No, and I absolutely love the stuff they've got here about designing achievements. I have this little group of buddies. The three of us were best friends all through high school and college. And one of the three of us was just obsessed with where he actually made a small amount of coin all through college, preparing achievements for people, just sort of talking to them and interpreting them in true heraldic lines and figuring out what a coat of arms for them might look like, even if they weren't entitled to one by birth, and then painting it for them. He did a wonderful job creating achievements this way. And so, going through the rules of achievements, going through the rules of contests of arms and why it was important. My dissertation for my PhD involved a lot of the records I was using were taken from the Elizabethan College of Arms, which was very elaborate and very thought out. It was a court of civil law. And so this is very cool.
I do like that
I
one
like
of the skills in here is the boasting skill to proclaim their lord's ancestry and triumphs. I am reminded of the boasting that happens in the Heath Ledger movie A Knight's Tale.
Yes.
That was quite entertaining, and so when they're distracting the bad guy's herald, and he announces him as defender of his enormous manhood. So,
Yes.
Just to follow up, and this is going to seem wacky doing this 2 articles in a row, but we talked about, I asked in terms of paladins in fantasy literature, who do you think of? When you start thinking of the role that heraldry plays in particular fantasy literature, is there anything that jumps out at you? Because I've got one in mind. Curious if you do.
Well, I mean, to me, again, the great herald in fiction is the herald in Shakespeare's Henry V.
Yeah. But I'm talking about the role that heraldry might play with the coats of arms and all the other stuff.
No. There's a character, a herald. He's never named. He's just called his herald, and his role and the part he plays, and especially if you've seen the Branagh Henry V, he has this strange, sad role of going back and forth and realizing, because he's a French herald, and realizing that because he has this role of being able to go between the lines and figure out when battles start and stop and helping people book their dead, the famous particularly, it's played very, very poignantly by the actor. So that would be the one that always jumps to my mind.
Yeah. What I'm thinking of is Catherine Kurtz's Darney series. Every character of note is introduced with a description of their heraldic crest in the novels, and the role that heraldry plays is kind of a big deal in the stories, and so especially if you get the original trilogy, the first 3 books, it's not as prominent in the later ones, but the first 3 Darney books, it is absolutely a big deal in there, and she clearly knows what she's writing about, and it's something that's sort of a big deal. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So there you go, Gen Con. You were there.
Oh yeah.
Milwaukee.
Remember that floor very, very well. Now torn down, all gone.
I think I was actually at my freshman orientation at NC State during that week.
I flew back from New York to attend.
The Orc's Nest. We've talked about it before. I've been to the Orc's Nest out there on Earlham Street.
I love the fact that it's tickety-boo. That's awesome.
Here's a little more on heraldry. So again, solid artwork. I mean, it's not going to win any awards, but it's not embarrassing themselves anymore. So, decent artwork there. Palladium is still Adventures in the Northern Wilderness. So, Palladium is still Munchkin Gaming strong here. But they've got some source books. Now, these are not riffs. These are a completely different set of fantasy source books with the high seas, the north, the old ones. But Palladium is still doing their thing. A little more on the heraldry piece. Disputes of arms. What do we got here? Conflicts arise when 2 coat of arms look alike.
Mentioning earlier.
Yeah.
That's one of the cooler pieces of this, actually. And when 2 people lay a claim to the same escutcheon.
Hey, look, a chart, because we couldn't help it, right?
Right. Gotta have at least one.
They went above and beyond. They gave you 2. So. All right. The Champions of Krynn computer game.
Gold box.
You played it. You loved it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, this owns a big chunk of my life. No doubt about it.
Was it Banzai Cat that had a Champions of Krynn thing going in the forums for a while?
It was.
That's usually he's the default guess, isn't he?
Yes, with this stuff anyway, for sure.
Yeah.
No, these were, this was, you mentioned the Bard's Tale earlier. This was the next one down. This was the Wizardry missed me for a variety of reasons, part of them system-based. but Champions of Kryn, absolutely, 100%.
The forum is still going. Check this out. We've now made 2 jumps on the forum.
They are having at each other. They are definitely going.
Yeah. The Temple of the Beastmen Shifting Maze game from GDW. So this was a Space 1889 thing, which is interesting because it's never specifically mentioned as a Space 1889 thing in here.
Yeah, other than the fact that this may be, well, A, it's in the font.
Yeah.
B, I mean, come on, you are trying to locate the Krog. Thank you, Frank Chadwick, for trying to duck the word crawl. Yes. Of the brutish High Martian potentate King Nashrik. I don't know what else I'm in. Is it assuming that we all just know Space 1889 that well?
Maybe. Or the other thing that I thought of is perhaps they wanted to separate this from Space 1889 in the hopes of tricking the stray random girlfriend or cousin to play. And then, oh, you had fun with that? Well, here, let me show you the Space 1889 thing that it's built off of.
Or, or the notion, which is still part of us today, is that there are certain folks, male and female, that want complex games, and some that want... This is very much a more... I don't know if it's any good. I've not played it. But it's a much more modern concept than 1889 itself.
Yeah. For King and Country, a call to arms and a new sort of campaign. So let's go join the military and then fight the campaign. Literally fight the campaign in the military there. Some years ago, 5-ish or so years ago, the DM in our regular game got a little bored with what we were doing, and he wanted to reboot the game as a military themed thing where we were all, soldiers in the King's Army, and we had, we started off on a big battlefield fight and then started working our way around from there. And it's a little, pardon the pun, it's a little too regimented. Right? It's
sure.
It's a little too strict for the free-flowing adventure kind of stuff that you really want to do. It's all right, so it's Wednesday. What are you guys going to do? Well, we're going to wake up in our barracks. We're going to put on our uniform. We're going to go out for inspection. Then we're going to fall into our daily command post walking of the grounds or whatever. And okay, so it's Thursday. What are you going to do? We're going to get up. We're going to put on our uniform for inspection. There was only so much coolness that you could do to it all. So,
there's a game by a Clash of Arms games. It's out now. Called Legion of Honor, yep. In which you play a soldier in Napoleon. You're specifically called a grognard, appropriate enough for this podcast, in the Grand Armée, in Napoleon's Grand Armée. And through the play of cards and the rolling of dice and interchange, you go through a series of adventures from the beginning of the Napoleonic Wars to either your end or the war's end. And Marco Arnardo, in his review, said, "I'm not sure it's a game as much as it is an activity, but I'm going to keep it because it's just got some interesting things to it." And the point he was making was, much like yours, I'm not 100% sure that people who come into this stuff and want to laden it down... I mean, look, we could go to the GrogHeads and come up with bucket loads of minutia of medieval warfare.
Yeah.
Is that what you want in your RPG?
We could do that in 20 minutes.
Sure.
Put a call out on the forums and watch the threads fill up.
Yeah, I don't... we're starting up the next Kriegspiel online, and I'm here to tell you, we got some pretty smart dudes out there, and they're coming with a lot of crazy, high-level, knowledgeable suggestions. Is that what you want in your RPG?
Yeah.
And these are some great ideas, and I absolutely 100% understand the motivation, but I don't know. I think you got to be careful. I do think you got to be careful.
Yeah. So early in the article, it mentions these different tables, and so military duties with no warfare, right? Construction, right. Patrolling, scouting, raiding, garrison duty, special mission. Honestly, garrison duty doesn't get nearly enough of that percentage assigned to it. So, major warfare, what are you doing? Number of weaknesses, officers, types of weaknesses. There are more than 5 types of weaknesses, folks. By the way, can we get a little formatting consistency on the tables here? Come on, guys, it's the 90s. We can do this. who are we commanding? What are the command groups? Come on, guys, let's get our spacing correct. It's the 90s. We can do better. Right? Required. So, again, is if that's what's fun for you, go for it. I'm not going to tell you not to. I'm not sure it would be fun for me. So, I pulled this back up here because we finally found our ICE ad. So it's not like ICE has gone out of business.
Just took a while, yeah.
They just moved their ads further in. I also wanted to back up because we've got twerps.
Yes.
We've got twerps. You ever played twerps?
Oh, sure.
Twerps is a blast. And anybody that says different is wrong. I'm halfway tempted to get out some of my old twerp stuff, blow things up in the photocopier to make stand-ups out of the counters, and actually have like a Fly-By-Nights twerps game at Origins next year. Just cause. Just cause. Not for any good reason, but just cause. So yeah, it's Jeff and Amanda D, and it was a ton of fun for what they were. They were cheap for a reason. They were goofy little games. You have one character trait, and that is strength. It's a measure of how strong your character is as a character. It's not just physical strength. But what was cool about it is it made for a quick, fun, storytelling heavy afternoon one-shot kind of game that you could do. And just the intro adventure that's built into the basic game is just trying to recover stuff from a shipwreck while sharks are chasing you around. But the rules are dead simple to play, and it's a lot of fun to just grab some friends and do stuff. So, of the expansions, Torps Magic, you could dump into a lot of different campaigns. I really enjoyed Fly-By-Nights. Fly-By-Nights was a lot of fun. Space Cadets was okay. Kung Fu Dragons was okay. There was a Mecha Tech one that was pretty entertaining. It was sort of BattleTech meets cyborgs. That was kind of fun. But Fly-By-Nights was always one of my favorites. So, World Made for Adventure, the Deathgate Cycle. So you'll notice new 7-volume series by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, best-selling creators of the Dark Sword and Rose of the Prophet trilogies. Because that's where Weiss and Hickman got famous.
Yep. Well, that's how they got their second contract.
Yeah. Well, but the key is, who's publishing this?
That's right.
It's not TSR,
no.
So we're not going to mention the fact they did a bunch of TSR stuff.
Right.
So, despite the fact that they're in this book writing stuff for TSR. But it is interesting that there is no mention of Weiss and Hickman being affiliated with Dragonlance in an ad for an upcoming Weiss and Hickman book. So, how to win wars and influence people? Lead your miniatures armies to fame and victory.
Yeah. This is the one that I saw this in the table of contents and have been trying to stay after and study this thing. This is kind of amazing. This is right after the release of Battle Systems 2nd Edition.
Yeah.
Which was, of course, the TSR attempt to take on Warhammer Fantasy. And it's a better game, by the way. It's too much for what it is. It's too convoluted. I've played a ton of it. And in fact, these days, I think, it's been so long, but I'm pretty sure all my 15mm fantasy guys are based for Battle System. And other than those, I have a couple armies for Hordes of the Things, but that's another point entirely. So this is an attempt to create a campaign system for Battle System.
Yeah.
Because Battle System, obviously, is a tactical system. But this is an attempt to put something around it and to put a lot of things that Kriegspielers would recognize into them. And letting a dungeon master fulfill that role of an umpire in a Kriegspiel. How do armies supply themselves? How do they march? What are the rules of organization? It's not the more social stuff you were mentioning about being in an army. It's how do you manipulate an army? How do you march an army? How do you feed an army? And all that other stuff. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I have no idea if this works. I had not seen this before. But it is interesting that they then they try to get you through all these pages. They try to get you down to the now we're going to fight the battle. And they have that too, and they have it how it ties to battle system. But there's a whole lot of quoting of Sun Tzu, a whole lot of quoting of Clausewitz. So this is pretty neat.
Yep. I thought you would get a kick out of this once I kind of ogled it quickly. We've talked about it before. Battle system essentially, and War Machine even more so than battle system, because battle system you could actually get the map out and do stuff on the map. It statted out the unit instead of the individual. And so here are my stats for the unit. And when the unit runs out of hit points, casualties, the unit's dead. But that's that at the time, that was a different way to approach mass combat, because up until then, mass combat involved lots of figures on a table. And War Machine, especially battle system to a lesser extent, you didn't have to have a map out there to play the battle. So, role-playing reviews. Here we go. We're crossing some genres. And so we've got Shadowrun, Spelljammer, and Space 1889. So we've got magic plus technology in Shadowrun. We've got space travel plus fantasy role-playing in Spelljammer. And we've got the original steampunk fantasy franchise in Space 1889.
I mean, of these, it'll tell you what an amazing time this was in gaming.
Yeah.
That you have 3 absolutely undisputed classics of the genre.
Yep.
What do you say? I mean, what are we going to say that's going to add to what Space 1889 is? This is, to me, it's still Frank's greatest game. But that's just because I love the subject so much more than some of the other stuff he's done. But, and let me be clear, Frank's also done a Napoleonic game, so that'll really tell you something.
Well, that doesn't mean he did a good Napoleonic game.
But he did. Valiant Bandit's a great game.
I know. I'm giving you a hard time.
It is a great game. Obviously, what do you say about Shadowrun? But I guess the one thing I would say about Shadowrun, and it talks about how the world has changed. You showed the ad for Gen Con 1990.
Yeah.
Gen Con in that era, 1991, 92, 93, those years in Milwaukee at Mecca, FASA owned the world. For those people who are going to be Jam, Cheek and Gel, and Gen Con in a couple weeks, you're gonna see all these other companies. But in those days, it was FASA. They had a gigantic banner. They had a gigantic table presence.
Well, and at this point, in 1990, it's BattleTech and Shadowrun.
Yep.
And then by the time you get to 93, you've now added Earth Dawn and Renegade Legion.
Right, but again, they never rose as high as they did when BattleTech became Renegade Legion.
Yeah.
Those things, when all those things melded together, as unfortunately BattleTech metastasized into all sorts of weird things, and they're not all bad, don't get me wrong, but some of them are just out of control. But these games, that game dominated Gen Con through this era, and then and again, I feel like I'm repeating myself. I suppose that I am, but when you then add Spelljammer into the mix,
yeah. Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
That's crazy, and it's again. I feel a little bit stupid because it sounds like I don't know what to say. But I would hope that if you're listening to this podcast and if you're interested in gaming, I don't have to explain to you what those 3 games are.
Well, Spelljammer perhaps, because after the death of AD&D 2nd Edition, Spelljammer never really came back. Now, it still showed up in some places online with some continued fan support, but to my knowledge, Spelljammer's never been republished as a new thing. The original stuff has been made available through through print-on-demand services or download services, but Spelljammer's never been rebuilt. Shadowrun's on a 4th or 5th edition, plus there's video game pieces that are built off of it. Space 1889 now has a Savage Worlds release and a 2nd edition, and here in the Triangle area, we have the Triangle Simulation Society that does a ton of minis gaming, and every one of their big events that you go to, somebody's got a Sky Galleons of Mars game going on. So those two have definitely had much more staying power, but I think Spelljammer has been sort of lost at the mercy of Wizards' IP control, where they've been focused on very specific systems with the subsequent D&D reboots, and they've never really decided to come back around to Spelljammer. So,
all I know is it always goes for a fortune in good condition.
Oh yeah, yeah. So here we go, SJA1 Wild Space, as the new stuff is coming out. So here's the Shadowrun review, the introduction. Cyberpunkish 21st century minus spaceflight and plus a major uncyberpunkish twist, the awakening of magic. And so you had elves, dwarves, orcs, and trolls floating around Shadowrun.
Yeah.
So,
I don't, Shadowrun, for God's sake, come on.
Yeah, exactly. But Space 1889, near past alternate history of Earth, you'll notice what they don't call it. They don't call it steampunk. But
right.
Every one of the trappings that they describe in here, the settings of Zulu Dawn and Stanley and Livingston, and England's Victorian economic and military empire extends the far-flung outposts of Flashman, the man who would be king, the jewel in the crown, Tom Swift and Jules Verne. This is...
But remember, it's also not steam powered.
No, it's not. But every one of the classic fantasies that they refer back to are what? Right? They're the same ones that steampunk claim as their progenitors. So, here's the Dragonlance expansion to the Monstrous Manual, the Monstrous Compendium.
Oh, sure.
The Gates of Raven's Bluff. Did any of your characters make it into the Raven's Bluff publications?
No. Submitted, never made it.
Yeah. For those that don't know, Raven's Bluff was a living city in that Raven's Bluff was... There were 4 modules in that series that introduced you to this city, to Raven's Bluff. And those 4 modules were populated by people's characters. They were actual characters out there somewhere. And they were all RPGA members that had their folks in Raven's Bluff somewhere, which is kind of a neat thing to see happen with your characters. All right, here we go with the Palladium guys doing some more stuff. The Creature Crucibles. I don't know as you've probably ever read much of these, have you?
No.
So the Creature Crucibles were kind of they were a follow-up to the Gazetteers, or a companion to the Mystara Gazetteers, that focused on non-human races. So the Tales of the Wee Folk went into the forests. Top Ballista, takeoff of Top Gun, was a floating city that had a magical powered air force floating around in there. That's where it's role-playing on a wing and a prayer. You were fighter pilots in a floating city that was the fantasy equivalent of an aircraft carrier. And where Tall Tales the Wee Folk was a little more serious with its forest exploration, Top Ballista was straight-up camp humor. But it's a very entertaining read. Here we go. Weiss and Hickman getting back to what they're famous for. We're going to skip past the story here because we got the rest of the magazine to take a look at. One thing that is a little annoying here, this is a whole lot of walls. I mean, this is Prattian walls of text here.
Mm-hmm.
Without a single graphic. Until the very end. We couldn't have moved that graphic further into the story somewhere?
Could have one. Just one.
Well, but you could take the one from the end of the story and put it anywhere in these 4 spreads of pure text.
Sure.
Here we go. Roll of computers.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Minds of Titan.
That's not the one.
That's not the one. All right, we're gonna go find the one so that we can keep the show moving. Which one are we after? David Wolf, Secret Agent, or M1 Tank Platoon?
M1 Tank Platoon.
That's a dumb question, wasn't it?
Oh my god, this game. Oh my god, this game. I understand, the love that many on the GrogHeads have of Steel Panthers Pro PE, and it's a great game. Don't get me wrong. It lacks utterly the drama and the story of M1 Tank Platoon.
Yeah.
It was on. I played it on the Amiga. I remember like I'm doing it now. Turning up a cassette that I had on my stereo of The Ride of the Valkyrie and thundering around a battlefield with my platoon. No earthly idea if anything I was doing was close to proper tactics, but I'm on a 19-inch screen. The colors you see in this picture, this game, it has not been bettered. There is no better tank game, and that's a crying shame. And that amazes me. And I've played a lot of them that have come since. I own Steel Panthers Pro P. I have the Super Dongle. But
not just the one from Origins.
No, I have that one. I have my super expensive Steel Panthers dongle, but this was it. This was, and you controlled it with an Atari 2600 joystick.
Yeah. So here's my problem with this whole thing, though. Just as you're reading it, they're saying the most realistic tank simulator to any computer. Not only do you control 4 M1 tanks, but all of the support units as well, such as mortar platoons, jet support, helicopter scouts, and infantry units. Okay, let me tell you, the guy in charge of those 4 M1 tanks is a second lieutenant who's 18 months out of college. Yep. I'm speaking from very particular experience here.
I thought you might be.
Having been one of them. As a tank platoon leader, you do not control multiple mortar platoons in support. First of all, there's only one mortar platoon in the tank battalion. So, if you're controlling multiple mortar platoons, it meant that you got a hold of a mortar platoon from somebody else's battalion, and I suspect that lieutenant colonel might be a bit miffed that you stole his fire support to be subordinate to some stray second lieutenant somewhere, especially since your mortar platoon leader is usually one of your senior first lieutenants in the tank battalion.
And I kid you not, I am pulling that support straight. It is coming.
You're not getting the jets going anywhere a second lieutenant tells them to go. If there's a second lieutenant telling the jet where to go, so you've got a forward air controller who's probably an Air Force E5 or E6, but that forward air controller is working with your fire support officer, who's probably a first or second lieutenant, but he's an artillery guy that, again, works for either the company commander or the battalion commander, depending on how your task organized. As a tank platoon leader, you're not bossing around jets. Now, there are cases where as a tank platoon leader, you might have a pair of helicopters that you're talking to that are helping spot for you, particularly if you're in a cav unit forward on a division or corps level screen or cover or guard mission where as the tank platoon you've got a particular location you're screening and you've got a pair of OH-58s or OH-6s working for you. You're never going to have more than 2 birds talking to a tank platoon, because as soon as you get up to 4 birds, you've now got a captain in command of that flight of 3 warrant officers as his other pilots, and they ain't taking orders from a second lieutenant. Right? And as far as infantry units go, if you're working with an infantry unit, you're working with another infantry platoon, guess what? That's a second lieutenant who's 18 months out of college. You guys can arm wrestle over who's in charge, but you're still both second lieutenants, right? At that point, it's a tallest midget contest. So this idea that as a tank platoon leader, you've got all this other support thrown at you, ain't happening. As a company commander, you could get a lot of this extra crap thrown at you. But at that point, you probably got more than 4 M1 tanks. Or if you've only got 4 tanks, it's because you're the infantry company commander with multiple infantry platoons that had a single tank platoon task organized over to you. So let's dial down on this whole realistic tank simulator piece when we can't get the basic unit organization correct.
Well, it's, I'm sure they tell you that was a choice of game design over reality. But,
Absolutely. I'm soapboxing a lot on this episode, aren't I?
It's
sorry, guys.
Well, it's also something you know a great deal about. So, yeah, that was the one I wanted to notice here. Look, and if we keep going, we're going to get to Starfleet 2 Krellin Commander, which was also one of the great early Star Trek games. It was, of course, it was Starfleet, so you couldn't call it Star Trek. One of those classic fly out to a billion different systems and fight whatever aliens you happen to find in the sector.
Yep.
In many ways, the great spiritual successor to games like Faster Than Light and stuff like that.
I do remember EA's Sands of Fire, the World War II tank simulator for the Mac. Not a half bad game. Not the most realistic game, but a fun arcade-style war game. So this edition of City State of the Invincible Overlord, I actually have this one. And I think I've still got it on the shelf in here somewhere. I'd have to go looking around to see. I've been rearranging my office some, so I got a lot of boxes piled up in places I wouldn't normally have them. But this one of the neat things about this box, there were a lot of books in this box. Now, they're not a lot of big books, but there are a lot of books in this box. So, you can see there are separate booklets for each character race. There are separate guides for each part of the city and the city-state. So this was kind of a neat box to have if you're into having lots of stuff in your boxes. Here we go again with the what do we have down here? Might and Magic. So Clue Corner, right? No Googling stuff, folks. You had to wait for Dragon Magazine to show up to get your clues.
Amazing. And yeah. I remember all this. Every gaming magazine, PC or otherwise, had to have this.
Yeah. Ultima 4 clues. Here's our convention calendar. We're going to wave at this and keep moving because we always get really bogged down in these.
Yep.
But folks, you can see this is 4 pages worth of convention calendar. Here we go.
Yeah, this is bigger than what we've seen before.
Yeah.
That was going to be my only observation.
Well, but in part, there's more of them, but I think in part because more of them are sending their stuff in.
Well, that's what I mean. This isn't a line scribbled on the back of an envelope. This is, people are realizing that if you're going to lure someone, you're going to have to put out something. This is pretty cool. This is a good time.
Yeah. Have you read any of the books in our novels column this month?
Dark Horse? Nope. I ain't watched. Nope. Unless there's more than... Do I see just 2?
3. War Sprite.
War Sprite. Yeah, I've read War Sprite.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't read any of these. So we'll keep moving. Voyage of the Princess Ark. This is only the 2nd episode of what was to become 30-something episodes worth of the Voyage of the Princess Ark that later got collected into what became the Champions of Mystara box set for the D&D game. But this is our buddy Bruce expanding the known world through an Alphatian explorer and his skyship. And so Prince Haldemar of Hakken was flying around Mystara in his airship, exploring the world of Mystara, the continent that was originally introduced just as the known world back in Module X1, way back when. They went and started expanding all those countries and detailing them all out, and then building off of that map with the X series modules. And so X1 introduced you to the big world. X2 was a single point location in the world. X3 started to expand a little. X4 and 5 especially stretched you out past Glantry into the desert. X6 Quagmire gave you the Serpent Peninsula. X7 and 8 were located elsewhere already on the map. X9, the Savage Coast, gave you the Orc's Head Peninsula down towards the southwest end of the continent. And what the Princess Ark did was it started to expand that world by more detailed explorations of it. So, Captain's Log, Stardate, Vertmeer 7, 1965. Let's go see what we've got. And off we go. And so you get it written as a journal from Haldemar of Hacken. And so here we go. The map that you know from X1 is over here in the top left corner of this map of Thyatis, the Thangioth archipelago. Okay, I can't pronounce stuff tonight. The islands down here, this is where the Isle of Dread is. And the known world as it was mapped through the Gazetteers expanded to the left off of this map. We're talking Isle of Dawn, Alphatia area stuff here. So this is far to the east off of the known world map from X1. And there they are, floating around the rest of the world, expanding the map. If you're interested, there is a great active Mystara group on Facebook. Thorfinn Tate regularly posts his maps from the Atlas of Mystara there. He has mapped pretty much the entire planet at some point or another at about 8 miles per hex for an entire planet. The dude's nuts. He's a fantastic map maker. Guy's nuts. So there you go. Here's your rules on ship flight. It's a 7th level cleric only spell. But Alphatian clerics devoted this spell for their skyships. So we have an explanation as to why they're floating around in the sky as well. There you go. You never did much with Champions of Mystara, Princess Ark, and that whole
Did not. Yeah.
That was my primary game world. Other folks were in love with Forgotten Realms. Mystara was my thing, and we've mentioned this before, but we've had Bruce on the GrogCast talking about his new product with his new game world Kaladar that is it has a heavy Mystara flavor to it, as you would expect. Here's some more sage advice. Here's a bunch of the jumps, right? So we've got King and Country, How to Win Wars. We're finalizing those articles back here.
Yep.
All right, so Dragon Mirth. I told you there was one here that you were going to get a chuckle out of.
Yeah, I saw this.
And they say awesome. D&D sends the wrong signals to children.
This is, look, we are not going to do politics. I get that. But let it be said, and this is something that's hard to explain to people that aren't old enough. The President of the United States has been taking up space in our collective cultural heads for a long time.
And by the time we got to this point, he'd been on the tabloid pages for 8-9 years easy.
Oh, yeah.
Going back to pre-USFL days. And we're 15 years out from The Apprentice.
Right.
Which is where a lot of...
Just from this cartoon, which you can tell is towards a later part of our first experiences with him. And this is 28 years ago.
Yes.
So whatever you make of that, he has been in our headspace for a long time. And as is indicated here, not always he can be a controversial figure.
Yes.
That's not new either.
No. Luckily, Morond had purchased some sticks and stones before the skeleton attacked.
I like that. That was cute.
This one I loved. This is genius right here. The Acme Instant Cement Mix, just add water. Let's just pour that into the moat.
You just get enough of it,
right? That is a well thought out siege plan right there. So, some TSR previews. What's coming up in January? We've got SJA1 Wild Space, so we've got the first expansion past the Spelljammer box set. We've got a Monstrous Compendium expansion. The World of Greyhawk, Veil of the Mage module, which you notice that they brought back Forgotten Realms. They're bringing back Eberron. That they've never really brought back Greyhawk after second edition D&D.
Right.
So, Icewind Dale Icewind Dale Trilogy Book 3.
Still my favorite of the PC iterations. I
Yeah.
like it better than Baldur's Gate.
Well, but we're only 3 books into the career of Dritz Duerden at this point.
Yes.
So, Creature Crucible number 3 is coming out here, which was the Sea People. There was a 4th one after that was the Night Howlers, and then after that, the Creature Crucible line kind of died. We've got a Dragonlance Prelude story coming up, and then we still can't get away from Buck Rogers.
They can't quite let it go.
No, they just haven't quite let it go. But we do have Agent 13 here. So those folks that never really followed the Agent 13 stuff, that was a neat concept. It was Indiana Jones as a bit more of a noir type of story. It was a really interesting idea that unfortunately got overshadowed by everything else TSR was doing. So, as with many pulp feel type adventures, probably worthy of a Savage Worlds reboot at some point, but we may never get there. Subscription to Dragon Magazine prepares you for anything as long as your DM allows you to subscribe to it. How do you keep a superhero's identity a real secret? Don't tell anybody. How hard is that? Here's our gamer's guide. Not really sure what's going on with that background there.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that myself. Is this in color and it's just got jacked up in the
I think it's just a bad scan because you've got kind of some gamer's guide stuff sort of reversed over here on the right side as well. Mm-hmm. So I just don't think we got a great scan on this one.
Look at you guys at Space Combat formatting on a Mac. You can always tell.
Yes.
Because everybody who owned a Mac at this time thought they were automatically competent in desktop publishing.
Well, they had the capability to do it far more than any of the others. I remember
that did not make it good.
No, but it made it better than the alternatives.
Well, that's a low bar.
That's
my only point.
In 6th or 7th grade, we had a bunch of Atari 400s and 800s in the school that I was at. Sure. And using the Atari Writer word processor, we managed to figure out how to format and appropriately bold and italicize and oversize the different headings. But we had about an 8-page superhero RPG that a couple of us did as a school project and managed to actually get printed properly through the Atari Writer word processor, which is roughly akin to trying to mark everything up with raw HTML code and then hit print and hope you get something that's close. This is pre-WYSIWYG editing.
Of course.
But we managed to get we killed a lot of paper trying to get the formatting right, but we managed to. All right, here you go. Put your thinking cap on.
These are great games. I've actually written about this. That this was a time in which the ownership of TSR, the management of TSR, the ownership. I take that back. It was the owner. Wanted to release some of the most well-regarded, simple introductory level war games ever released. Battle of Britain, from Richard Borg is in that series, and these two creatures.
Well, and
as well as 1809 campaigns on the Danube, Napoleon's Last Battles got an iteration, and for God's sake, in no way introductory, Wellington's Victory came out under this imprint.
Keep in mind also they did Air War in there as well.
Yes. Yes. So no, I've got these both on my shelf. It is. It's been a long time since I have linked them up to play both scenarios at the same time, which is the proper way to play them.
Yeah. But the reason they had to make it a simple game was they were counting on people being attracted. They were counting on book fans crossing over into the game world, and they couldn't make them real heavy war games, they couldn't make them too crunchy or they were going to lose the players.
Oh no, and I would love to talk to the designers, particularly of Red Storm Rising, because there's a lot of stuff in there that would make our friends at who crank out a certain very well known computer game, and also folks from Lock and Load. There's a lot of stuff in there that you sense that they knew, and they just kind of had to throw onto little sidebars to say, hey, just so you know, this tank is this.
Yeah.
Even though it gets reduced down to a single combat factor.
Yep. Yep.
But no, these are really good games.
Yes.
Like I say, they're not going to satisfy the rivet counters, but they're still good games. Play them tomorrow if anybody wanted
to. Here's our back cover ad.
Here they are trying to. It's fascinating to me that there were so many attempts to get at what we would now call hobby board games.
Yeah.
This is this game is completely out of place in Dragon. But it's an attempt by TSR to try to hone in on some family market board gaming.
Well, and so one of the things that I wonder is if these games, the market simply hadn't matured yet to the point for these games, or if these games were just legitimately bad enough that they weren't gonna go anywhere.
Well, I mean, you had experiments, right? You had the Dungeons and Dragons digital dungeon, the one with the silver pieces that just made noises.
Yep.
Which I still have, and I love, and I've taught my son, and we will still play because it is still a good. It's stupid, but for its time, you had Dark Tower.
Yep.
Which will go for a king's ransom if you ever see it for sale. That's obviously some years earlier than this, but I mean, and you had games, and we had board games, but I'm going to go with your first comment that I don't think this market had matured. We were still thinking of board games as Monopoly and Parcheesi and Sorry, and now I'm not defending Whip of Gold. I don't know it from a hole in the wall, but there was wargaming, and then there was pretty much everything else.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know that this had come up yet, but it is fascinating to see TSR dipping its toe in here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think the one thing that you still see in virtually every single game that is out at this time, whether it is a role-playing game or a quasi-combat-ish game, the way you win is you're the last man standing. You still have to knock everybody else out of the game. The games are still very heavily built around an elimination mechanic. There's no Carcassonne with a final round of scoring kind of thing that goes in there. Every single one of these, the way you win, the way you succeed is you kill everybody else or knock them out of the game. And we still see that a lot. So, all right, here we go. That was it. That was Dragon 154. I know this is a little later than your normal preference, but I thought you would get a kick out of this one.
No, I loved this. Compared to the last one, which I was I was disappointed in. This is of this generation, of this later generation. This is easily the favorite one I've seen.
Yeah.
A lot of great history. Some of the introductory stuff that, like I say, would later become some of the guides to historical moments. But also some good writing about war games, even if they are fantasy medieval war games. Some good memories in the PC reviews, and good all around. I enjoyed it. Thumbs up.
I think something that we see in this issue of Dragon Magazine is that where we're not getting articles that are directly speaking to the wargame audience like we saw back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s number issues with John Prados writing the Simulation Corner with having ASL scenarios in there, for Christ's sake. We're still seeing the war games continue to be advertised, and look, partly because that's a TSR publication, but we saw M1 Tank Platoon in the computer column and quite a bit of discussion around it. We're still seeing war games on the periphery of what has now essentially become a role-playing heavy magazine. And I think in large part just because there's so much more role-playing content as the role-playing market expanded in the 10 years that we've been, between when we saw ASL and Dragon and when this issue was published, the role-playing market's just exploded too much that there's too many other things to cover to put ASL or System 7 Napoleonics in Dragon Magazine at this point.
Yes.
So I think that's just kind of where we are. All right. Well, this was a fun issue. This is certainly better than the last issue. The last issue I was horribly underwhelmed with. You were disappointed. I hated it. But this one I dug. This one I thought was a lot of fun, and I suspect this is probably one that if I dug it out of the box here in where I've got it stored in the game den, it's probably a pretty well-worn issue of one that I would have read quite a bit.
Thumbs up.
Awesome. Well, let's do this again sometime. What do you think?
Sounds like a plan.
All right.